All right, Drew, we've been giving away some tickets, so we're not going to have Rocket Man to intro you this morning, but I think you're okay with that for 1 week, right?
Yeah, I'm fine, Gary. Thank you. Good morning. Always great to be on with you in Tuscaloosa. How you doing, man?
Doing great. Got some Dirks Bentley tickets, and I was, you always, when you do these trivia, I know you do it on your show too, you go back and forth between too difficult and too easy. You know what I mean? And
Right.
initially, I was going to ask for all of Nick Saban's coaching stops, all of them, going back to Kent State where he played. And I thought, well, shoot, man, that might be too difficult. So I went with his head coaching stops, and that turned out to be a little bit too easy. But we'll make it more difficult as we go on. Hey, listen, Alabama football, full speed ahead now. We've got a chance to see him through 3 practices. Of course, Saturday was a big day with media day, fan day, open practice, autograph session. You were in town for the entire day and watch the entire practice. Just some, I know you like to keep mental notes and maybe even write down some notes. Just some things you took away from that 2-hour plus practice on Saturday afternoon at Bryant-Denny Stadium.
Well, I mean, I thought that physically, as Nick Saban said, this is a team that's in very good shape. I thought they looked really good off the hoof. I mean, and it's hard to take a lot out of it because, they're just in shorts. They weren't in pads yet. But certainly, I thought that Tua and Talia Tagovailoa both impressed me, the way they threw the football. When you look at the running back position, I thought Brian Robinson really impressed me in teamwork, the way he was running the ball. Of course, Najee Harris had moments as well, but I just think Brian Robinson is someone that's going to break out this year. They certainly have got 2 young backs that passed the eye test, and Trey Sanders and Keelan Robinson. Trey caught the ball extremely well. He overcame a little bit of a shoulder stinger early in the workout to come back and then really do a nice job. So certainly they look like they're going to have quality depth at the running back position, no doubt about it. And the offensive line, it was the usual suspects. I mean, we know Leatherwood and Wills are entrenched at the tackle position. Interesting to see Landon Dickerson at right guard. We didn't see him at center. The centers we saw were Chris Owens and Emil Ekiyor. Ekiyor taking a lot of reps with the first unit at left guard. Evan Neal getting some as well. And then we saw Matt Womack and Deontay Brown at right guard as we expected. So the offensive line is big and physical, it looks like. And yet that front really impressed me on the defensive line. I thought they were able to get some pressure during teamwork. And that's without LeBron Ray, Justin Bogby taking a lot of first-team reps also. I think that defensive line has a chance to be a really deep group. They're young, but they're talented, Gary. And I think, by the middle to the last third of the season, if they can stay healthy, that first 3, DJ Dale, Raekwon Davis, LeBron Ray, if they can continue to develop those young guys behind them, I think the defensive line can be, a really special group.
Drew, speaking of LeBron Ray, I mean, you covered him in high school. You know him well, and we continue to be told that he's going to be okay. But I always worry when a guy's not out there, just because sometimes, it turns into be a little more than what you think it is. How confident are you that he is going to be fine and he is going to start practicing and he is going to be ready to go against Duke on the 31st?
Well, I think he'll be fine, Gary. I mean, they're going to be precautionary. They don't want it to turn into something else. But barring a setback, and I haven't heard of any, I think LeBron will be out there along with Miller Forstall. And I think he's got a chance to be a special player. I told our good friend Rodney Orr when he was recruited that I felt like by the time he was a sophomore, and especially going into his junior year, he would be ready to be a superstar. I still believe that. He had moments as a sophomore last year. I felt like when Isaiah Buggs went out against Auburn that he came in and they didn't miss a beat. I think he has a chance to be a special player. He really started to blossom, into his 10th grade year at James Clemens High School and became a dominant force along that defensive line, and I think he can do the same thing. I mean, you hate to say, Quinnen Williams, because Quinnen had as good a year as we've ever seen individually for one season at Alabama and became the 3rd pick in the draft, and it's already making waves at the training camp with the New York Jets. But I do think LeBron can make a huge jump. I think he can be an all-SEC level defensive lineman, and then he'll have a decision to make if he can stay healthy as to whether or not to leave early for the NFL draft. But I think he and Raekwon Davis can be a great combination at defensive end. I think DJ Dale is going to continue to blossom at the nose spot. So I think that the starters look really good. I'm just really excited to see Fedarian Mathis and Stephon Wynn. They're two guys that have been in the program that I think have a chance to make a leap and get into the rotation. But when you think about Antonio Alfano, Justin Ebogbe, guys like that who, along with DJ Dale, are freshmen, and you're already seeing a lot of them with the second group and Ebogbe with the first, it should make you excited because also Byron Young, he certainly passes the look test. And I thought there's been a lot of talk about Ismail Sopsher. He doesn't look sloppy. He's certainly having to adjust the heat in Alabama and really for the intensity of practice and who he's going up against. But the last really big defensive line that Alabama had was 2016, and I think they have a chance to have some really good depth with this group if these freshmen continue to be quick studies and mature.
Host of Talkin Ball, weekday mornings, 7 to 9 a.m. at 97.7 ESPN Radio in Huntsville. You mentioned Raekwon, an interesting character, and I use the word character in a good way because he's got a big personality. I think he's a fun-loving guy. On the field, the ability that he flashed his first couple of years led us to believe that his junior season, at least I believe this, he would have a big year and he'd go on to the NFL. He didn't play up to his potential. I think he recognized that. That's why he's back. But when a guy comes back for his senior season that most of us thought would be going to the NFL after his junior year, you have to believe that he's serious about football. He's serious about having a big year. And if that's the case, and this guy, the light comes on for him, not just on some downs, not just in some games, but all the time, Drew, he can be a wrecking ball up front. I mean, physically, if you draw up a defensive lineman, you draw up Raekwon Davis, right?
Well, yeah, he gets off the bus first, certainly. I mean, he's unusual from the standpoint you don't see a lot of defensive linemen his height. I mean, 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", that are almost like a basketball player. But he moves so well, and he's got, he's a great athlete, Gary. And he had 8.5 sacks as a sophomore. I thought he was dominant. He had a dominant spring after his freshman year, and it carried over into the season. Last year, for whatever reason, he couldn't get rolling. I mean, and part of it was probably having to adjust to being the hunted. Guys were, game planning for him and trying to take him out of, he didn't have, as near as good a year as you said that he wanted. But I thought it showed a lot of maturity on his part. He didn't get angry. He didn't blame the coaching staff. He didn't decide to move on anyway. And he still would have been drafted, certainly on his potential, probably third or fourth round. But he made a very good decision to come back to school. If you have a dominant senior season, which he's certainly capable of doing, he will be up for a lot of postseason awards. And I think he can easily move back into that first round. So I think he made a really good decision for himself and for the football team at Alabama. We know what kind of talent that he has. I mean, he's, and if he's really embracing the leadership, and that's what Nick Saban's talked about, is the leadership within this group. If he becomes the alpha dog in that defensive line room and follows in the footsteps of what John Allen and guys before him have done, and then if Dylan Moses can take control of the linebacker room, and Deidre McKinney and Shai Carter on defense, this is a group that can be very cohesive and very good. Because I'm going to tell you something, Gary. I was really impressed with Pete Golding at the press conference on Saturday.
Yeah, I was too. Both those coordinators, I thought they hit it out of the park. To the offensive side of the ball, and I'm going to ask you about the backs, and then we'll take a break, and we'll come back and I want to talk to you about Tua. But with Najee, who is a guy that has extreme confidence to the point that, I mean, he just thinks that he's, as good as anybody. And he's been frustrated because he was kind of the third wheel behind Harris and Jacobs, the other Harris, Damian Harris and Josh Jacobs. And then you got Brian Robinson. He's been frustrated because he's not even really been in the mix at running back. Now, these are the two guys with some talented players behind them, especially the two freshmen, Sanders and Robinson, along with Jerome Ford. How do you see them filling that role of being a kind of a 1-2 punch and being happy both of them getting enough carries. Do you see that being something that will be good, or do you see it maybe being an issue, knowing how badly both of those guys, want to carry that football and be a workhorse?
Well, I think with those guys being the 1-2 punch, if they continue to do things the right way, I don't think there'll be any issue. Certainly, while he's had to be patient, he's still gained over 1,000 yards in 2 years with Najee Harris and been very productive when called upon. Now you just have to continue to expand your toolbox. To be the starter, you've got to be sharp. You've got to block well. You've got to catch the football. And I think, we saw it in the practice, but I think the running backs, due to the tight end spot not having as much experience, and Miller Forstall not being out there right now, they're going to try to involve them in the passing game. So you've got to do your job as a receiver. Certainly, I think Najee Harris can do that. I think he's a big physical running back. I mean, some people say he doesn't run as physically, but I think he runs hard. I do think he needs to watch, the leaping. I do think he could put himself maybe in harm's way with that. I think maybe, you need to make a little bit better decisions sometimes deciding to hurdle somebody, but he does run hard. He runs hard. He's got to protect the football. That's the first and foremost if you want to be the bell cow at Alabama. But I'll say this. When I look at him and Brian Robinson, Gary, I see a lot of similarities between two big backs that they had with Eddie Lacy and T.J. Yeldon. And I think they were a dynamic duo in 2012 when Alabama repeated as national champions. I think both these guys can make runs at 1,000-yard seasons. I think Brian Robinson is well-rounded. In high school, he could block, catch, and run. I think he'll do his job. He's already been a blocker at Alabama in the role that he's embraced, which is kind of a Roy Upchurch role. Now he's going to get more of a chance to run the ball. I'm excited for both these guys. I think they can bring more physicality, especially inside the red zone, running the football for Alabama. And then maybe you see a guy like Trey Sanders or a Keelan Robinson, even a Jerome Ford, develop into that third back. I still think Trey Sanders has the most talent because I think coming in, he had done a lot at IMG as a runner, receiver, and kick returner. So I'm anxious to continue to see him build upon the start he's gotten off to. But I really think this 1-2 punch at running back with Najee Harris and Brian Robinson, especially with the size they bring, 225 pounds, and both have good speed, I think they can wear defenses down. And I think one of the first things out of Steve Sarkisian's mouth, it should be music to Alabama fans' ears as he talks about running the football and getting back to Alabama being a physical team.
No doubt about it. Drew DeArmond, our guest here on the Bud Light Hotline. I want to ask you about receivers and Tua on the other side. Let's go ahead and get Tom on real quick since he's got a question about Najee, and we've been discussing the running backs. Tom, good morning. Go ahead and switch him over, Josh. Good morning, Tom. How are you?
Morning, Gary. Morning, Drew. Drew, the thing about Najee compared to Brian Robinson, Najee wants to jump up in the air, jump over people, and all that kind of stuff. It worries me that he's going to get hurt really bad doing that. And when Najee will put his shoulder down and drive through the tackler, he is a much more effective runner. And I want you to speak to you and Gary, speak to that running style. And I think Najee has got to keep his feet on the ground and be willing to lower that shoulder. And if he doesn't, I got to go with Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson is a powerful running back, and he will hit that hole and lower that shoulder and drive for that extra yardage.
All right, Tom, good call. I think we got it. Drew, you spoke to this already, but Tom said he thinks Najee needs to be a little more physical. You said earlier you think he will be, that he is a physical back at the core.
Well, he needs to be. And if you go back and look at the 2017 National Championship game, he was really physical against Georgia and helped spark Alabama's running game. I think Alabama's also going to be smart with him. They want him fresh for for November and down the stretch so he can wear people down. I certainly think that he does need to, pick and choose. You don't need to hurdle too many times, and because when you leave your feet, you do open yourself up to a lot of hits. So I agree with Tom. I think he needs to, Charles Huff needs to, work with him and continue to coach him up and use sound judgment when you decide to do that. but certainly you don't want to affect his style. Every running back is a little bit different, but I certainly think that Najee has the talent to go for 12 to 1,300 yards behind this offensive line, and I think Brian Robinson, given his opportunities, can make a run at 1,000 yards too. I think this team is going to be a much better running team than we've seen at Alabama for the last couple of years, no question about it.
All right, 9:50. We got to get to break. We'll come back, have another short segment with Drew. I'm going to ask him about Tua and the wide receivers. That's next here on the Gary Harris Show.
Trying to climb a Tetris to score against this line.
Keith, I wouldn't be surprised to see a run to the left, because if they throw it, it'd be very tough to kick a field goal from that right hash.
Classic. Touchdown.
Well, you don't need to kick field goals when you can get it into the end zone.
Touchdown in that national championship game over Miami, 34-13. That was a beauty. Back on the Bud Light Hotline with Drew DeArmond. And Drew, remember now, because I love that you go in depth, but we got about 4 minutes max left. So I want to ask you about this this combination with Alabama's wide receivers and Tua at quarterback. Let's start with the wide receivers. I've said this. I might have mentioned this to you Saturday. I don't know that I've ever seen a better group on one team in college football. I'm talking about the big four, of course, the three juniors, Ruggs and Smith and Judy, and also Waddle. But you got Mechie coming in, you got Xavier Williams, you got some other guys that Tyrell Shavers that can still factor in. I just don't know. There'll be some teams, in my opinion, Drew, that just won't have enough physical ability on the back end to cover these guys. I mean, you're gonna have to be exceptional in the secondary for them just not to wear you out. I mean, this is as good a group as I've seen at Alabama. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's the deepest. I made that statement. I think it's the best in the SEC since Riedel Anthony, Ike Hilliard, and Quincy Green. And that was quite a trio for the Gators, but this is a foursome. And, I mean, some people may call me a homer, but for my all-SEC ballot, I voted for 4 wide receivers, and it was those 4.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I can't really choose because Devontae Smith makes clutch plays. Of course, he made the biggest catch arguably in Alabama history to win the national championship in 2017. Biletnikoff Award winner Jerry Jeudy. I think the most talented of the foursome in Jalen Waddle, and he really came on at the end of last year. And then you've got Henry Ruggs, who can run a 4.2. So I just really think they don't really have a weakness. I know there's not. Some people might say there's not a big physical guy among them, but I do think that they play. They're more physical than they're given credit for. But I think they're outstanding receivers. Certainly, they have to find a way to replace Irv Smith and the target he was in the red zone. But I think that can be done with running backs. I think also Miller Forrestall will get some opportunities. But I will say this: watch Giles Amos. I think he's somebody that may be the answer at the blocking tight end spot, and those tight ends will be open due to the wide receivers and the way they can match up. But I just don't. I think it's going to be very difficult. Most teams are lucky to have 2 good corners. You're going to need 3 or 4 to really stop this Alabama team. And if the offensive line can give Tua Tagovailoa time, he's so deadly accurate that I think any of these wide receivers could have 1,000 yards. We've never had Nick Saban have 2,000-yard receivers in one season. I do think it could happen with this group. I think all of them are first- or second-round draft choices. And if you're an Alabama fan, just enjoy it because you don't see this kind of talent very often. And as you said, Gary, there's young talent behind them too, and John Mechie, Xavier Williams, Slade Bolden. But they're kind of getting overshadowed by some tremendous talent in that top 4.
All right, Drew, we got about a minute, but I got a chance to ask Tua a few questions on Saturday, and I think it's easy because there was so much hype, and he came in the second half against Georgia in the national championship game. We know what he did, but last year was his first year as a starter. He'd backed up Jalen his freshman year, and I just don't see any way in the world that he's not going to be better. I mean, having gone through it and then dealt with some adversity toward the end of the season. Unlike, most of the season, it came easy, but toward the end, and I'm going to use the word maturity, even though he was older than Jalen chronologically, he was not as experienced. And I just think this season, we're going to see some things from Tua in terms of maturity in making decisions that are going to make him a better player. You agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Steve Sarkisian is going to help Tua a lot. I mean, I think that was one of the reasons he was hired, is due to the relationship with him. He's a quarterback whisperer. I've always told people, they talk about Trevor Lawrence, and he's going to get better too. He's only started for 1 year, but both of them have only have very small sample sizes. So there's one of two things: you either get better or you get worse. And I think both are so ultimately talented and coachable. If they're both going to get better, I think Tua is going to step up. Again, is he guaranteed that he's going to get 4,000 yards? No. I mean, Alabama, if they're better at running the football, he may get less opportunities. Sure. But I think the play action passing is going to help Tua, and I think his efficiency will go up. And boy, he was efficient last year. But I really think he has a chance to do some special things, and really, he won't own every passing record at Alabama due to only starting 2 full years. I don't think anyone believes he'll come back for his senior season. It wouldn't be wise. But he has a chance to put the best back-to-back seasons together by far of any Alabama quarterback in history. And he has so many tools in his toolbox, even without Irv Smith, that this can be as good an offense as we've ever seen at Alabama, led by Tua Tagovailoa.
Folks, he's Drew DeArmond. You can listen to him weekday mornings from 7 to 9 a.m. as co-host of Talkin Ball on Huntsville's 97.7 ESPN Radio. Follow him on Twitter at DrewD977ESPN. Catch him on my show every Tuesday. Also, listen to him on The Game with Ryan Fowler and other radio shows around the Southeast. Also contributes to TiderInsider.com. Drew, we appreciate the time as always, buddy.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it.